Everybody, welcome back to the Identity Jedi Show. We've got a great podcast set up for you today. Great show for you if you're watching on YouTube. I've got two special guests here to talk about one of the things that if you guys have been following me, you know I've been hinting at and raving about for the past couple of months, which is ITDR. Stands for Identity Threat Detection and Response. Because I think this is a big hot thing that's coming in the world of identity that not a lot of people are talking about. So, you know, your boy had to come and talk about it. So without further ado, let me introduce my special guest because nobody can introduce yourself quite like you can. David Bullas, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Dave Bullas. I've been a security professional for a very long time, and I've got a chance to work with Dave Lee in a couple of iterations. And I'm here to talk to you about ITDR. I'm Old Man Kayaking on Instagram. I love talking about all things security and kayaking. So that's me.
Yeah, Steve Riley. I've worked with Dave, and now I'm working with Dave. But I've been in the security industry for a long, long time, just like Dave, and worked heavily in SOCs and MSSPs and all sorts of nasty places. So I've done the footwork, the legwork, and also talked at the highfalutin area as well. So I love talking security like Dave does, and we have a great time all just getting together and enjoying each other's company. So good to meet you all.
All right, so we're gonna jump right into it. So I'm really excited to talk to you two specifically about this. I feel like, right, and not trying to give it any more hyperbole than it probably deserves, but I just feel like the ITDR space is number one fascinating, and I feel like it's a wave that's coming that not many people are talking about. It's one of these things where it's like if you know, you know, like the smart kids know that this is coming. And I feel like it's one of these things that's going to just kind of overtake the industry fairly quickly because it's just like this natural progression of where identity needs to be. I talked with Matt Cofield from ORT last week, and you know, just kind of talking about his background is he's a network, you know, security guy, right? And just looked at this and kind of came to this realization. He was like none of this matters without identity. Like this, and I'm just, and I told him I laughed and we talked about it. I was like, dude, I was like, us identity people have been saying that about your security people forever. It's like, yeah, you guys are just gonna run around. But it's like you're a lot of stuff, but you're not like involved in identity. So this true combination of identity and security finally coming together. I think, you know, from an identity perspective, you know, we've been bullshitting and marketing it for like the past 2-3 years, but we haven't actually been taking steps towards doing it. Now we're kind of starting to see it. So that's kind of where I just kind of want to like open this conversation and talk about it and get your guys' opinions, what you guys see, and yeah, just kind of go from there.
Yeah,
Sure.
well, both of us have lots of opinions.
We do very much so.
And that's
Let me jump in. Let me jump in here, Dave, and let me just talk
Yeah.
a little bit about how I see this. And I describe it to people this way. What identity has effectively done is taken a lot, not all, but a lot of the information that any attacker would want, and they've already done all the work. They concentrate it all into this small handful of platforms in their business. All the information about who are you and what do you have access to and what's your name and what's your department, like who are you to the business, what do you have access to, your PII. They put it all into one place, and then it's like they took it and they walk out to the curb with a basket full of all your goodies and they put it on the curb and they walk back into the house and leave it there with a little note tacked on it saying please don't steal. And this is what organizations are doing. This is what identity naturally does, because we need that information as identity professionals to do our jobs. But I don't think anyone thought about the fact that they just created the best thing for an attacker to get their hands on. And this is ultimately what ITDR is about. It's about recognizing that, wait a minute, not all applications are created equally. We know that. But these identity ones, they need extra protection. And you need a protective layer to wrap around it. And companies like Word and like Authamize are building a solution that means that you walk back out to the curb, pick up your basket of goodies, walk into the house, go down to the basement, build a vault, and put the protected information inside there. That's what they're ultimately doing. And that's why, like you were saying, we've been talking about it for years, but here are companies that are doing it.
Yeah.
And solving a problem that has emerged as companies are getting more mature about their processes. Because what happened is that maturity has changed where the information is located. It's located in these cool spots. Awesome. Let's protect those.
Yeah, exactly. So, my background's in network security as well. So it's kind of interesting. I worked with SIMs a lot for probably the last 10 years. So the interesting thing in this part of the market is as ITDR is coming to bear, we're starting to see some interesting things, right? So what I'm seeing, and this is actually talking to, I've got a lot of friends that work for MSSs and MSSPs, and it's interesting, a lot of the dynamics and structures inside of there, they're starting to bring identity more core to their security infrastructure. And so even the reporting structure of the individuals are coming back up into the security infrastructure again. And I think that just goes to that point that Dave's kind of making, is that we've left our, we opened up the kimonos and said, hey, everyone have a look. And now we're saying, well, we're going to lock it down now. And we've got to start putting process and structure around it, just like we did with everything else. Like if you think in the day, networking used to have a perimeter, but now networking is very perimeter less. It doesn't really have one anymore. And the reality is applications are on the forefront and on the edge. And what protects us? It's actually the IAM tools. It's the identity infrastructure that's protecting us now. It's not down at the session layer. And mapping a session layer to a user is near on impossible. There's so much encryption and so much other, I'm going to say, probably access lists and controls and other facilities that are being deployed out there, that it becomes really problematic. And even companies like Cisco, with some of their applications that they have that actually do monitor what users are gaining access to, they're limited in terms of they've only got so much memory they can, stack up before things start falling over and sessions start dying. So, and who wants that, right? Because it's like, what's the point? I can't get access to my application anyway. So what we're seeing is this movement to what I call more identity correlation. So it's like, take the SIMs of the old world. They tried to do, this sort of work, but they just can't, because the data is so broad and so just detailed that you have to write your own rules and I guess scripted items to pick up and bubble up those correlation items. And the only way to do that really is pulling directly from the identity infrastructure, and then having an author and authorize come in and build, really specific items across those logs, so that you're actually bubbling up real information rather than, oh yes, I want to find out these 3 users, all the things that they have access to. Yeah, well, good luck. I've got QRadar. That's going to take me 4 weeks for those 3 users. It's like, no, I need to know now. And it's like, I can't give you that now, right? And if it's not that, it's a large spreadsheet, which takes just as long.
Look, man, I would always think like, we should all just go home. Like we've got Excel. It's the greatest IAM tool ever created. I mean, like right? I mean,
Tell me about it.
IT runs on Excel, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what?
And CSV files.
Exactly. I was like, what? Tools, CSV and Excel, baby. I got it all figured out.
We're all done.
It's very interesting to see how we got here, right? I remember having conversations with Darren Rolls back at Cellpoint 5 years ago, right? And looking at the landscape and where we were going and saying like, look, when the quote unquote bad guys figure out like where the actual control is, I was like, we're screwed, because we don't, because these companies identity companies don't think like traditional security companies. Now they want it to be part of the story, and we wanted to market it part of it. Why? Broader market base, raise your total addressable market, talk to more people. Security had bigger budgets usually at the time than IT did. Great, awesome. And it makes it's a nice story to fit into. But from an aspect, we didn't, and when I say we, like the industry, those companies didn't run like security products or companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, and then to the extent you don't train, like identity practitioners for the most part are either developers, some kind of engineers, or they're administrators, but they're not security administrators. They're like, I'm here to go manage this process, make sure this workflow go, or let me go get the app back up and running, right? They don't understand like threat hunting and vulnerability and how to go find something and what this means. And that is a new skill that I think we're going to have to see transition into the identity practitioner tool bag. And part of that, I think, is going to come to your point, Stephen. We are seeing like consolidation of organizations, right? So identity is being plucked out of the IT organization. Said, hey, we're going to put you over here with security. And I can only imagine, like, I would love to be a fly on the wall, right? For one of those bigger organizations, like, okay, security guys, identity guys, and they're just like,
work.
right.
Yeah. Well, so Dave, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Of all of the work you did at SailPoint, how many times did you talk to somebody inside a SOC?
Never.
So there's a whole part of our organization that's dedicated to protecting all of our stuff. And they're not even having conversations when the conversation is being about, I'm buying my identity solution.
Not in the slides. And in fact, I will say this so I don't get in trouble. Across my career at a broad range of companies, not just one in particular, there would be several times where if I was brought in on the pre-sale side, like we purposely avoided those conversations because we didn't want to get bogged down into those details and those questions, which look at the time made sense because, you know, when we look at identity and the growth and the maturity of where it's come, right? It literally had to start with administration because we had to just say, we got to get a process around all this stuff. Like we can't even figure out what's what, what's where, whatever. Cool. Makes sense. And like anything with growth and maturity, right? Hopefully the same things you do at 5, you don't do at 15. The same things you do at 15, you don't do at 30, right?
Hopefully. You learn new mistakes, but yes, I agree with you.
And it's like, so it's the same with, I think, with identity and why I'm excited about ITDR, because it's, like I said, I believe it's the next evolution along with some other things of where identity has to come, picking up some new skills, but it's using all of this information, right, that we collect with an identity. And David, I love that analogy that you let off with, because that's what we did. We centralized everything and said, here's how you make sense out of all of this, right? Hey, bad guy, you want the key and the roadmap? Here you go. Right? Here's the vault. Go down left, make a right, go past that corridor, wave at Linda on the right side, and keep going, and you got everything you need. But we needed that, right? Because we want to control the process, automate like where things go, and make sure that we're giving access quickly. And so now what we have to do is like how do we actually defend that and alert that and combine these two kind of disciplines of like, as you start to see things happening, you see multiple MFA attempts, right? Or multiple authentication failures. You start to see these things. How do we make sense of them? Provide context and says, okay, well, this is David's account. Well, like, who is David within your organization? Here's his complete identity profile, things he has access to. Great. Also, from a security perspective, now I can see the other assets that he's tied to, like how risky and how high of a threat is this? And how do I need to go deal with this, right?
Well, that's the thing, exactly.
Yeah.
In the real world, once you get out there, they're dealing with an uncountable number of threats, more threats than they can possibly deal with. And the alerts coming into the SOC are just two things come out of a solution like ITDR. One, the identity context, so that they can immediately prioritize some of the ones that are about the people in the business that really have high vulnerability. Okay, hey, that's the CISO. Everyone knows that one. But did you know this guy's a shadow admin and he's got the ability to add people to any group he wants? Whoa, time out. That's very, very risky, right? That's part of it. But part of it's also like baking knowledge into how you protect your single sign-on is a little different than how you protect your IDP, which is a little different than how you're going to protect your infrastructure as a service. But ultimately, these are all identity problems. And by combining the identity context with specific knowledge about these kinds of applications, about specific knowledge about that core identity infrastructure, you get huge power. You actually don't want a solution that connects to every application in the business to protect your identity infrastructure, because they're not going to understand the types of risk that emerge when you take an IDP, you stick it on top of your single sign-on, and you're using that to federate into your IaaS. They just don't see the interplay in between, and they can't possibly protect you. And that's another way we did it. And by the way, you were talking about it, and you said it absolutely right. Walk past Linda, wave at her. But it came from a good place. We needed that information, as you were saying, because we needed to do the job. The job of being an identity professional, of moving people through the organization, of properly having them join and move and leave, You can't do that if you don't understand the people and get connection to these key systems. But now we have to recognize what we have done and say, well, best intentions were we wanted to create the ability to do something cool and powerful, and we can, but now we need to protect it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, like, over the last, I guess, umpteen years, out of all the different security companies I'm working for, one common theme that keeps coming through is think like a bad guy, right? You hear that all the time. And the reality, I think, is in identity, it's like, well, I've got a password. I'm good. You know what it's like, bad guys don't think like that. They don't think you've got a password, you're good, right? It's like, I've got a database of passwords. I can throw them at anything. And if that's not enough, I've got some money and you've got some people. I've just do it the easy way. Let's socialize this. Social attacks are probably more prevalent than any other form of an attack.
Who was it? There was somebody, Steve, who was offering $500 cold cash to anybody who would just give them their username and password to their current organization.
You know, I should probably do something like that at Black Hat. That'd be awesome.
Right? But and
see
somebody's going to eventually take them up on the offer. They're like, oh, exactly. My account, I'll create a dummy account with no access, and then I'll sell it to you for $500. If you give them an account with no access, very shortly that account has
they'll have access. No access has access to something.
That's all they need to get started.
I mean,
exactly.
Look, you could probably, account for inflation, but me and Kaiser did this, what, five years ago at Navigate? We literally, it's out on YouTube, people, so you can go search for it. Mike Kaiser, David Lee. I think if you search,
that's right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, you'll find it. Like we just asked people.
There's no $500 you were offering though. How much were you offering? Like
what? One lady said she'd do it. I think it was like $20. Because again, right?
I need a free lunch. I'm not interested in my company.
Right. Like and the cut that's out there, right? Obviously was edited, stuff like that. But dude, like we talked to some people, like the biggest thing was like it was sentiment of like, was this person happy and did they like the company that they work for?
Mm-hmm.
Like if they truly like their company and their job, they were just like, no, like I'm not gonna get, like they would ask questions, stuff like that. One guy was like, I hate this place. You want? I'll give it to you right now. I don't care. Like it was just they like either A, they didn't like the place, or two, the scarier one is they didn't understand the importance of it. They're just like, whatever. Like, okay, fine. Like I'll give you access to. I can give you password to my email account. Like that doesn't mean anything. And I'm just like.
And the interesting thing is DLP has the same issue, right? It's like initially when DLP first came to the industry some 10 plus years ago, it was like, okay, switch everything on. Oh no, don't switch everything on because now nobody can do anything. Okay, so we reduce it. And then it's like, well, I'm just I don't like where I'm at, or I like the code they've got, so I'm just gonna copy it out to a repo somewhere, and those sort of things just keep happening over and over again. It's not only the outsiders, but the inside attacks that we have because of, to your point, just unhappy employees. Right. They don't care about the company. They don't care about anything other than
repo management's a thing, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
GitHub, GitLab, others, and there's others out there too. I'm not picking on them. They've built a fantastic set of products. And their ultimate goal is sharing. Because sharing is caring, especially around code.
Right.
But controlling what you share, there's not a lot of people thinking about that.
I mean, companies like Palo, for example, have so many security things in place. I mean, even get down to the laptop and locking you into place. You can still get around it. It only takes a few minutes. I mean, I could copy code, put it straight out on my own Git repo, and I'm done. And they wouldn't even know. They wouldn't even know. So it's interesting.
I think it's this thing of we're still very much in the security market of like, we're trying to build this impenetrable wall, right? And that's our defense model. Like, put up enough stuff, and you got to break through it. And that's not the, and it's this it's this hard shell on the outside and like soft and gooey from the inside out, right? But my insider's just like, oh, I just get through it. But like but the answer to this, in my very humble opinion, for me not so humble, but the answer to this is really it's not about like it's a mesh architecture that kind of moves, and not mesh between, like, yes, I get it, cybersecurity mesh, blah, 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 that stuff, whatever. Not knocking it. It's smart, but mesh in the sense that, like, what's the difference between like a solid wall and something that's mesh? It moves, it stretches, right? It's able to kind of like adjust to where you're going. And that how we have to build like security systems, which is, coming back to like ITDR, which is why like this is one of the next evolutions for identity, because identity is very rigid and solid and kind of like, we do this thing, we did it, and we're off over here, right? As all these attacks are going on, these breaches are like, hey, we had nothing to do with it. We did our job. We did this. Very rigid and moving this way. It's like, no, identity has to move to the forefront, right? You have to be an active part and a defensive part. And that means you have to be more agile and more in how you move, right? You got to be able to dynamically do things, right? This whole, like, I've been trying to people have been trying to kill the password for 20 years. I've been trying to kill access requests since the time I got into identity. I was like, this is the stupidest thing in the world. Like, right? Like, why? Like, so you go and you say, hey, I got to go get access to this thing, right? Cool. So let me go to this system and pick the things that I want. And then most of the time it's like people, they don't know what it is. They just know that, like, I started on Monday and David's like, hey, you need access to A, B, and C application. Great. All right, let me go request for it. And now I'm supposed to tell you exactly, I need access to this application. Well, what role do you need? What is that? I don't effing know. Like, give me, and that's how we get what? Copy user. Give me what David has. When you look at it, right? Okay. We know if you've got an IDP, like, who the user is when they authenticate it, they go access the application at that point. At that point, I know what application you're trying to access. I know who you are, and I can easily route it and go, okay, 1 second, let me redirect you. Let me go look and run a policy, say, do you need this access, right? If we're truly doing things either by role or actually using, machine learning AI like we're supposed to, then we have a general direction of peer cluster. Go, oh, well, here's David. He works in David Bullas' department. Like, yeah, like, it's pretty low risk for him to have this. So I'll go grant David access, redirect you back. Access has been granted, like, you're in. Now, like, your deeper entitlements you may not have access to, but you're access into the application. Now it's like, oh, like, now I'm talking to David. It goes, oh, you need to go run reports. I need access to reporting. But now you know specifically what you need to know. Like, this should be a thing that, like, you can literally interact with the user and figure out. There should be no need for the user to go anywhere and do access. And we've been able to do this at least for 10 years. At least. Yep. I remember actually creating a prototype back on Lombardi Teamworks, right? When that was still around, showing my age, right? How you could literally, like, use their extensions to plug into an application and then, like, send back API requests. And I could do all of that on the screen. It's like, so fast forward to where we are now, I look at some of this stuff, like, identity has wanted to stay in the shadows for too long, right? And just be like, no, we're we're just on this administration side. And I really think now, like, you can't hide anymore, right? Especially since you marketed for the past couple of years that you are security. Okay, well, guess what? Time to step up and show that you actually are.
Identity has become a step on the growth cycle of every organization. Yeah, they don't always do it at this number of employees or this number of employees, but every organization is now including it in their growth. So let's use it to help us grant dynamic access. I'm not talking about dynamic group memberships or any of the nonsense that's out there. And there's a bunch of vendors out there, you know who you are, who are like, oh, we'll create dynamic groups. We'll base it on static properties on your user. Oh, hell no. That's worse, not better. That's the same security control, only I can't even tell you if you've got that property or not. Like, no. I'm talking true dynamic access, where there's an actor there that you're installing and configuring that figures out if it's appropriate or not. And to your point, Dave, maybe on occasion we'll reach out to somebody to ask, but most of the time we know.
Yeah,
I know what you do. I know that there's 7 other people with a similar role than you, and I can figure out what your role is, by the way, by doing a bunch of very, very basic stuff to say, yeah, you're basically a sales engineer. Maybe you got some more stuff. You're also a director. Fine.
Cool.
Great. These are the things you have access to. You try and access anything outside of that, it's like, and here's a link there who to go to access so that to go talk to so they can proactively approve you. Yeah. But let me grant you that access temporarily. And then we know the risk involved in leaving dead access around there. Let's remove it when they go home at night. Like, this is not, this is the promise that we've been talking about.
20th century.
21st century stuff.
Oh yeah, that stuff. Yeah.
These are the things we need to be working towards.
Yeah.
And let's kill passwords while we're at it. But that's all.
Look, man, one thing will kill at a time.
But I do like it. I do like this thinking, because that's exactly right. I think you, in general, we know the risk of bringing on a user, the groups that they are going to have based on their HR role, or the role given to them from HR. It's like that's all very well defined. And the only time users get risky is over time. Like I've been here for 15 years. I slowly get access to this and that and whatever
Or
else.
I cloned the access because you said you had to have access like this guy, and he'd been there for
Yeah.
15 years. Now you got 15 years of access in 15 days. Go for
Yeah,
it.
exactly. So those sort of things, it's like just what we know, get it done. What we don't know, then let's apply some sort of risk value to it. I know Microsoft tried that a bit, and it's kind of a little bit fluffy right now, and
Microsoft
it's
did what Microsoft does. They've got a great idea for small end
yeah,
companies, and they should.
yeah,
But you
yeah.
got to scale this problem out, and actually, by scaling it,
Mm.
get better, not worse.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like conditional access, right? Policies of Microsoft. It's like as soon as you start scaling, it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now if I switch this on?
There's always going to be this balance, right? And when I look at and I'm going to say this as a context, and then at the end I'll kind of turn the question back to you two, right? You look at there's always this balance of administration and governance, right? Meaning, and I'm going to be very clear when I say this, administration is like I am administering the things that are going on, right? So I need to
Mhm.
do conditional access, I need to do these access things. Let me set up the rules. Let me make sure they're set up the right way. Governance, let me make sure these things still make sense, right? Do the rules I created 10 years ago still apply? Do the rules I created 30 days ago still apply? There's always that access, that portion of it. And then there's the other side of just kind of the actual action day to day of like I need to be involved on it. Like I need to be making sure that things are corrected and remediated and bring it back to that, right? That is the balance that we always talk about. And I think specifically one of the challenges, I I like that word opportunities better. One of the opportunities for ITDR specifically for identity is to kind of learn from some of the, I don't want to call them mistakes, but lessons that we've learned in traditional security with like XDR and stuff like that, and apply that to identity and learn that and some of those things. Because Stephen, you made the point earlier that like it's not like this hasn't been tried to do before. We just didn't call it this with like Seam and all this stuff, whatever. Like, let's get all this stuff
Mhm.
together, and then it was like, but they couldn't take the actions because they didn't have the context, and it was just super freaking hard trying to pull all together. Why? Because identity wasn't involved from the beginning. So all you had was CN equals 80 DL 765 OU BS. This okay, cool. That's all I had. I didn't know anything else about it, right? So then
Yeah.
when I see the AD record and then I see all these other logs, I had no way to correlate them, and there's no way that I could correlate it by itself, right? Whereas
Yep.
one query to an IAM system, either your IDP or your IJ system or whatever, with that D, and it's like, oh well, this is here you go. Here's everything you want to know about this person, right? Like
Exactly.
combine
Exactly.
that, and I could combine their HR record and go like, oh, you got access logs for David on this day? Yeah, he's been on vacation for 2 weeks. So
Probably
Shouldn't be
wasn't
doing
him
anything.
messing
Yeah.
around with the BS
right.
OU. I love how it was OU equals BS. That was very, very nice, Dave. I like that.
Come on, man.
I caught that one.
Subtly get that one in there. Right? But so to you two gentlemen, right? What I would ask and want to hear your opinions is, what do you think are some of the opportunities for ITDR in this next 2 ways, in this next year and then the next kind of 5 years, for like changes that they can bring to the industry,
All right. So
specifically identity?
first and foremost, they will provide armor to these critical vulnerable systems. One of the biggest changes is real protection on top of this identity infrastructure, which just helps everybody. But putting on my thinking cap and my spy glasses, I think it's more than that. I think it's also not just providing armor, which I think it will do, but because it understands the connective tissue between these critical systems, being able to streamline and also provide you better ways of doing your job, because it can see things, and like it is going to be a cornerstone technology for this wave of dynamic access, passwordless authentication, all of those things. It's not going to do all of those things, but it's going to help make all of those better. Look at your MFA solution, right? Pick one. There's lots of them out there. There's great ones, and I would love them to have the factors that they declare based on the information that we're protecting in these identity systems? What do you know about their access to these critical systems, right? I went back to the idea that it gave the example of a shadow admin, somebody who's not an administrator themselves, but has the ability to do administrative things because of how access has been delegated to them, right? I want to know that they're a shadow admin when I go and have them log on, because that represents a much higher risk. So while on the one hand, they're going to be adding more protection, on the other hand, they're going to be making our other security controls better. That's where I see ITDR going.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I think Dave's spot on with a lot of those statements. So, from an identity perspective, what I'm going to add to it is, from a security perspective, it suddenly opens up a whole new world, right? A world that they have not been looking at very deeply before. At the moment, if you look at most security systems, it very quickly gets to what IP address did that come from, right? So it's it's like there's two ways to look at things. You can either look at the assets you have and then all those things that attach to your asset, or the individual or the identity you have and all those things that attach to that identity. And what we're finding is right now in the industry, from a security perspective, it's the identities that have the weakness and they're the exposure point. And so it's more about the identity and all the things they connect to. So what I expect to see is just that general more visibility. So what does Dave have access to? What hardware, what applications, what devices, what third-party, whatever he has access to. I want to know all of that. And then who is he related to? Like if I hop onto that device he's got, tell me all the other identities that are living there as well and that have access to this. And then what groups have access to that? And what's federated and what's not? Are there tokens that are associated with this as well that are attached to people or attached to devices? What are we looking at really? And that's the sort of information, the level of information I expect us to get to, that we can start seeing that. Because today, we have a heck of a time seeing that sort of information. I'll tell you that most SIM environments, it's like, I can tell you about the gateways, tell you about the networks, I can tell you about some of our core assets. And then it gets kind of, a little bit flaky after that. UBA tried to solve some of that, but it didn't.
So that is extremely interesting, because what that tells me is that there is a chasm, right? So if you say from a security side, it's like, okay, look, I see these things. I see IP, I see gateways, I see devices, right? And then as far as like who the people are and how they get access to it, like it just becomes fuzzy and I don't know, right?
It's just attachments, extra stuff.
Right. From the identity side, we see identities, we see groups, we see entitlements. He goes, but what that stuff connects to, and we're
it gets so fuzzy.
Literally in the middle, right? It's where all the bad guys live and go, hey, this is awesome. Like,
I'm going shopping.
Right? You can't see me on that side. You can't see me on this side. I am good to go. And it's one of the things that, to a broader aspect, right? I do think that, and I think it's going to take a while. I think what we're seeing with AI may accelerate it to an extent, but I do think in the 5-year mark, what we're going to see is truly, security companies and identity companies kind of merging, right? Or an identity company kind of pushing out and becoming more and more of a security company, or vice versa. I think those things are going to come together because of the fact that, like, you have to be able to get that full coverage, because either one has never been able to do it. Like, the companies have tried from the identity side, companies that will not be named. Don't try and get them.
Where did you used to work, Dave? Never mind.
Hey, if you DM me and I've had a couple old fashions, I may tell you. But look, they've tried to jump and go into that darkness and go, yeah, this is ugly. We don't like it here. We're good, right?
It's a hard problem, right?
But it's not just
hard problem.
Yeah, and it's not just the traditional companies that are doing IAM. Just to be clear, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have ID, you have IDP, you have your single sign-on. Single sign-on is a security tool, but the single sign-on, I've worked with all of the major single sign-on vendors. There's not a one of them that I would put a stat on and think these are security people, right?
Yeah.
They're building a solution, and to a certain degree, their job is to make that solution as easy to adopt as possible. And we all know security often is the gravel in the ointment, right? So that, and they try and smooth all that stuff out to make it real easy and powerful and do cool stuff. And to my way of thinking, what ITDR says is it says do that. Use those tools. Make them. Don't rely on them to protect themselves because they can't.
Right.
They
Yeah.
need an outside view because one, they're not security oriented. Their orientation is on making it easy for you to deploy them and make them easy to use. And two, even if they were, they can only see what they can see. You need something that sees the different key security identity pieces and sees them together, and you're never
Yeah.
going to get that. We talked
And
about this before, Dave.
yeah,
How putting brakes on a car was the critical enabler to make the car go fast. There's nobody that's going to get into a car that doesn't have brakes on it because they're going to go more than 3 kilometers an hour, and then they're going to wear out the soles of their shoes, stopping it like Fred Flintstone. Okay, I dated myself, but fine. But ITDR is going to be the brake for identity. It is going to be an enabler that allows identity to get to where it wants to be, because there's going to be somebody, the bodyguards, the security team going, yeah, we're keeping that guy safe, even though he's shaking all the hands and kissing all the babies. So we'll keep them safe. That's what ITDR is going to do.
yeah.
It's going to allow us
And
to
I
use them better.
and I think to your point too, guys, if you think about, we were talking about some of the dynamicism around the edge, right? And how dynamic it is and how it moves around. I think with ITDR, we're going to get closer to understanding what that really is. What does that edge look like? What is the new environment? What's my new perimeter this week? Because last week we didn't have this company, or last week we didn't have this SaaS app, or last week we were just on premise, but now we're hybrid, or this week we went completely in the cloud, right? Because we know that's happening over the next 4 or 5 years. We'll probably see close to over 90% of companies mostly be in the cloud of some sort, the bigger ones having their own clouds because they can afford it. But it's that sort of concept is really changing the way we're looking at how security works, how we interact with things, and then the whole automation. Like, think of ITDR from the perspective of, we got to detect and remediate. That infers some sort of automation of some sort, doesn't it? It's like, how's that happening? Are we going to have like a special ITDR saw, or is it going to be, are we going to plug into those saws that exist already inside the infrastructures? And it's interesting if you look at like Gartner's model around this. They're very much identity.
You said a bad word, Steve.
I know, it's evil. This
No.
and networking data and all this stuff, right? But I think the reality is, the focus has to be more identity. It has to come more from identity, whereas those other pieces play a smaller part. They don't play a major role. It's like, if you own a SIM, you know what? We'll tell you what's going on with your identity infrastructure if you need it inside that SIM. But we will hold the keys and help you understand how everything works and hangs together. Because there's no way you want to ingest these other 23,000 logs that we've already got inside your system and bog it down, right? I mean, think of companies like AT&T. They generate something like 9 terabytes of data or petabytes of data every second, right? There's no one that's going to process those events. So it's like, well, we'll just look at what looks to be bad, right? And hope everyone stays safe. And that's why they get pwned occasionally, right? Because it's difficult. It's a difficult problem. There's no visibility. And you also mentioned AI, and I love that, because I don't see AI ever solving security problems in our world. And the reason for that is that we've been doing AI and machine learning for the last 10, 15 years. Nothing's happened, right? That's a silver bullet. And suddenly it's hit the public, and the public's like, oh, wow, AI. But where it will solve our problems, when we start investigating how we decide what we don't know that's in there. So what we know, we build rules for. But what we don't know, we don't build rules for, because we don't know. And that goes back to threat and hunt, which is where we need AI, because it's really complex problem to solve, to find the bad guys in the soup. But it's like, it reminds me of like, okay, we've got all these rivers running into the ocean, but I only can put a few nets in. And if the fish get through those nets, then now I'm looking in the ocean to try and determine where those fish are. They're in the ocean somewhere, but who's going to find it? And who has the smarts to do that? And this is where we need, problem solving on the AI front to actually sit in the back end and do a lot of that heavy lifting for us, because we can't find it ourselves.
I think we
Anyway,
could have an
my 2 cents.
entire
Another
meeting. By the way, David Lee, if you want to have a discussion about where we're going with AI and ML and how that's what's real and what's FUD, invite me on back. I'm more than happy to have a long conversation about there. I've dug my talons into that pretty deeply over the last few years, and it's some interesting stuff, right? When are we going to do all the math? That's the context. But
we'll
but
definitely
to
do it.
But to Steve's point, there's a need for, and ITDR provides some of this, but we're talking more generally across security. There's a need to get the computers to help us, not through some AI that's going to sit out there and figure it out, but by crunching a bunch of numbers for us and putting some better tools into our hands. And it is one of the things that ITDR, with its knowledge, specialized knowledge of these critical IT systems, they can put eyes on things that nobody else can.
So here's what I'll say, right? And we'll say this, and then we'll kind of move on and kind of start to wrap a little bit. The reason why, and I'm going to speak specifically for the identity industry, and I'm probably going to piss off some vendors, and that's fine because I don't care. They don't write my checks anymore. But the reason why we failed when it came to like AI and ML in this industry is because we tried to build Skynet and not Jarvis. And that's the difference. Jarvis, if you look at Iron Man, right? For people that don't know, if you don't follow Marvel, Jarvis was a natural language AI that Tony Stark just interacted with. And it's not that Jarvis did things for Tony. It did, but it was a partner to Tony. So when Tony wanted to build something, it's like, hey, Jarvis, I want to go research this, fabricate this, do these things. It made Tony faster. Now, Tony in there is already typically a genius, right? But it just gave him that much more capability because the stuff that he didn't have to do, to David, just your point, the number crunching, the research, the little things like that or whatever, it was already done. And he could continue to move at that speed and figure out a solution. It was his helper to figure out the solution. We never tried to build that night initiative. We tried to build Skynet. Oh, let's go do all these things and does this thing. No, build a fucking helper, right? Like that's how AI helps, right? Because it'll do
stealing that. Build Jarvis, not Skynet.
Yeah, it's
agreed. Totally agree with that.
And look, I'll get on a rant, so I'll stop. We'll have you back on. We'll have it. We'll do it. We'll do the AI ML discussion because I think it's something I've always been fascinated with, right? For me, like it always hits a hot spot because coming out of college, I thought about going back and going into academia, and that's what I was gonna do, like data science and AI ML. And then I decided I've had enough of school. I kind of want to go make some money. So whatever. You pick things in life.
One of those things. One of those things.
So, gents, thanks so much for coming on. This was fun.
Wow.
We just got to talking, which is this, and this is the type of conversations I love to have, and I think that the viewers appreciate, my subscribers appreciate. So I'm gonna give each of you like any final thoughts that you want to do. We'll start with Steve. Any final thoughts for you, man, on the topic?
I just think, like you are, I think ITDR is a very interesting space. It's on the growth. A lot of companies are not looking at it yet. I think the industry is just a little bit behind right now because of other factors such as, hey, everything's costing us a crap load of money right now, and we don't want to spend it. And so when companies start spending on net new ideas, let's say again, I think what we'll see is a little bit of an explosion in this space. And in fact, I've seen companies, even like PanW, right? They're starting to, they have discussions about ITDR, even though they don't even have an ITDR solution, right? They talk to it and they say, oh yeah, we can solve ITDR, but they can't. They don't have a solution, right? It's across the industry. So it's starting to pick up some volume and grow some legs and arms. And I truly believe in the next 6 to 18 months, you're going to see this space start ramping up. And what is it going to look like? I don't think it's going to look like the well-defined Gartner documents, that you see out there. I think what we're going to see is some more interesting things happen around identity and around some of the identity infrastructure itself. And everybody's starting to play a little bit better in that space and communicating and bubbling up the security elements that really matter, that people really need to know about, and driving that outcome. So I just see a lot of change that's ahead of us. especially in the next 6 months, especially in security teams and groups, as this becomes a bigger and bigger noise out there in the space. So that's in fact, I would be really interested to see if anyone says anything at Black Hat. That's what I'm going to say.
Cool. David, what about you, bud?
Yeah, first of all, everything Steve said there was totally. I agree with him on that. This is something that's emerging, and it's emerging quick. I think we need to look at ourselves as identity professionals and recognize what we have done. We have created a incredibly powerful set of information, and we put it on platforms with no security. Ultimately, that is why there is this getting pushed for ITDR, and we as identity professionals need to embrace, because by putting good security in place, we are going to enable ourselves to move to the next stage of identity, which is we get to be the heart of the organization. That's where you put your armor. You don't have armor, you can't have an exposed appendage sitting way out there being in control of everything. It just does not work. If we want to move to the center of organizations, we need to be accountable for our decisions and say we need to protect this information, because we have created a powerful solution for making the business better, but we can't leave it exposed to the whole world all the time. That would be best.
Nice.
I mean, it's worth it happening, right? All right. Well, guys, awesome. This has been great for all the listeners, all the viewers. If you watch this on the YouTube channel, you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. For all of the subscribers that are getting this in the audio version, because by the time this gets done, you will have an audio version to subscribe to the newsletter. Thank you so much for subscribing. You guys know where to check out IdentityJedi.com for all the latest. This has been the Identity Jedi Show. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening to the Identity Jedi Show. You can find out more great content at www.theidentityjedi.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, check out the blogs, and just get everything that's coming down the pike in the Identity Jedi universe. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Whether or not you listen to this on the podcast, if you're watching on the YouTube show, y'all know what it is. Until next time, be good to each other, be kind to each other, love each other. We'll see you soon.